Shalom. We're up to Parshas Balak. It's a wonderful chance to learn with you from the Holy Land once again. I want to share with you a little bit of a troubling story about myself. The story goes back a number of years. My wife and I were in Emek Rafayim. We were going out for dinner. It was in the middle of the winter and it was raining, pouring, wind was howling, freezing cold. We get out of the car and across the street, it's already dark in Emek Rafayim, I see an old lady sort of walking along the side of the curb, and I see her teeter and then fall straight into the street. So I rush over, there are a few other people who rush over to help her up, and as I see her lying there, I see that she's lying spattered in mud. There's this like pool of like white liquid like right next to her mouth, and she's holding a brown paper bag in her hand, in one hand, and a bottle of wine in the other. And I look at her, and I make a snap judgment, as many of us would have, and it's crystal clear to me. She's a drunk. She's probably a homeless alcoholic who just passed out in the middle of the street. Obviously, I'm still going to help her, right? She's still a human being. She deserves help. But I felt an inner revulsion when I looked at her. As we helped her up, she began muttering about some party she was supposed to be at. Okay, right? She's partying, and about how her friends are going to come get her. She sounds like she's just, mumbling nonsense. But all of a sudden, a bunch of very, very nicely dressed elderly people come to collect her. They weren't sure where she was, and they get very upset when they see that she fell and she's hurt. It turns out, this is the story. The real story is that she was actually going to a dinner party. She's an elegant elderly lady, and she went to buy a gift for her hosts. So she walked into a makolet on the corner. She bought at the makolet a bottle of wine and a bag of milk, which was in that paper bag. When she had fallen in the mud, that's when her clothing became filthy, and the bag of milk burst open. It wasn't vomit. That was a bottle. That was a spilled bottle of milk. This happens to us all the time. We realize that when we make snap judgments, when we look at just a little moment in a person's life or a little facet of a person's personality, we think we know the whole story. We think we know who they really are, and usually our judgment is negative. Usually because of that little moment we see, we're sure we know the whole story, and the whole story is rotten. That same point shows up in Parshas Balak. Balak is desperately trying to convince Bilam to find some way, any way, to curse Am Yisrael. And his first strategy, if you had to think, how am I going to curse the nation? So it makes sense. You climb to the top of the highest mountain, you look over the entire camp, and once you can see the entire camp, right, you have a clear perspective. You're able to say the curse, and it's gonna apply to the entire nation. Balak tries that, and Bilam says, "Listen, nothing doing. God's not letting me do that. God's not going to allow me to curse Am Yisrael." Balak is not one to give up easily, and he says, "Okay, that strategy didn't work. Let's try something else." And here he says something very, very powerful. He says to Bilam, "L'chana yitzi al makom acher." Let's go somewhere else. Let's try a different strategy. Asher tirenu misham, and we'll look at Am Yisrael from there. Efes katsehu tireh, v'kulo lo tireh. You'll only see the edge of Am Yisrael. You'll see one part of Am Yisrael. V'kulo lo tireh. You will not see the entire nation. V'kovno li misham. And from that perspective, there you likely will be able to curse them. What's Balak saying? Balak is saying a truth that if we can internalize this, we'll be different people. If we can internalize this, the way we relate to other people will be transformed. That whenever we see negativity in another person, whenever we see something that drives us crazy, that annoys us, that infuriates us, it's because we're only seeing part of the picture. We're seeing one little slice of a complex reality. Balak is saying to Bilam, if you can only see part of Am Yisrael, so then you'll be able to curse them. If you can see the entire nation, you can see the entire picture, not just every Jew, but perhaps every Jew and the history of Am Yisrael as well, the context within which Am Yisrael right now are acting, there's no chance you could possibly curse them. There's no chance you could see anything negative. The negativity we see in other people or other groups is when we only see them in a slice, one moment in time or one group of people, and not the entirety. When we encounter a person and they rub us the wrong way, when they drive us crazy, take a step back. Ask yourself, where is this midah of this person coming from? What must his childhood have been like, right? Can we think of positive attributes that might come from the exact same midah, right? How does this function in his life to make him the person he is? And oftentimes when we ask those questions, the anger is diffused, the annoyance disappears, and we're able to relate to the person as in Tzelem Elokim, the way they should be treated. Have a wonderful Shabbos.